I never planned to expose my mother-in-law's financial fraud during lunch. But when Margaret Sullivan posted those photos of herself lounging on 7 Mile Beach while my husband and I struggled to pay our mortgage, something inside me snapped. The day started like any other Sullivan family gathering, with Margaret holding court in her perfectly decorated dining room, surrounded by crystal glasses that cost more than our monthly car payment. My husband Michael, his sister Rebecca, and I were all expected to attend these monthly family lunches. It was tradition, Margaret always insisted, though the tradition mainly involved her scrutinizing our life choices. "Michael, darling," Margaret chirped as we sat down to lunch, "have you reconsidered that job offer at Harrison and Mills? The salary would be much more appropriate for someone of your standing." By standing, she meant someone from the Sullivan family. Never mind that Michael loved his work as a high school teacher, making a real difference in kids' lives. To Margaret, anything less than a 6-figure corporate salary was beneath her sun. "Mom, we've discussed this," Michael said, passing the ham. "I'm happy where I am." "Well, with the inheritance from your grandfather, you could at least afford a better neighborhood," Margaret continued, shooting a disapproving glance at me. She'd never forgiven me for encouraging Michael to follow his passion for teaching, rather than join his father's law firm. I felt Michael stiffen beside me. "Actually, Mom, I've been meaning to ask about that. I tried to access the account last week to pay for some home repairs, but it was empty." The crystal glass in Margaret's hand paused halfway to her lips. "Empty? That's impossible. There must be some mistake." But I knew there was no mistake. I'd spent the last 3 months tracking every penny of that inheritance, ever since I noticed suspicious transfers from the account. As a forensic accountant, following money trails is literally my job, something Margaret had conveniently forgotten when she started moving funds around. "No mistake," I said, opening my laptop. "The account is completely drained, all $250,000 of it." Rebecca leaned forward, her fork forgotten. "But how?" "That money was in a trust. It couldn't be accessed without Michael's signature. Unless someone had power of attorney," I said quietly, pulling up the documents I gathered. "Someone who convinced Michael's grandfather to grant it before he passed away, claiming it was to help manage the estate." All eyes turned to Margaret, who was suddenly very interested in rearranging her silverware. "Mother." Michael's voice had that dangerous quiet I'd only heard a few times in our marriage. "What did you do?" "Now, darling, don't get upset," Margaret began, her perfectly manicured hands fluttering like trapped birds. "I was only trying to protect your inheritance. The market has been so volatile lately." "Is that why you transferred it to a Cayman Islands account?" I interrupted, turning my laptop screen around. "To protect it from market volatility?" The photos from Margaret's Instagram filled the screen. Pictures of her at luxury resorts, on yacht trips, at high-end restaurants, all tagged in the Cayman Islands, all posted within the last week. "You've been monitoring my social media?" Margaret's voice rose with indignation. "That's an invasion of privacy. Like forging your son's signature on transfer documents is an invasion of his trust." I countered, pulling up another file. "The bank's fraud department was very interested in these signatures, by the way." Michael's face had gone pale. "You forged my signature. Only to protect you," Margaret insisted, her careful composure cracking. "You don't understand how these things work. Money needs to be managed properly." "Managed properly?" Rebecca's voice dripped with disbelief. "Is that what you call buying a yacht share and staying at 5-star resorts?" Margaret's husband, Thomas, who had been silently eating his ham throughout this exchange, finally looked up. "A yacht share? Oh, you didn't know about that either?" I asked, pulling up more photos. "Your wife bought a 25% share in a luxury yacht 3 months ago. Cost about $80,000 of Michael's inheritance." Thomas set down his fork with a clatter. "Margaret." "It was an investment opportunity," Margaret said quickly, but her voice had taken on a desperate edge. "The returns would have been." "There were no returns," I cut in, "because there was no investment. Just like there was no real estate opportunity that took $95,000 or emerging market funds that swallowed another $75,000. Would you like to see the transfer records?" The elegant lunch had ground to a halt. Rebecca's teenage daughters, sensing the tension, asked to be excused. Thomas looked like he aged 10 years in 10 minutes, and Michael just stared at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been stealing from me? Stealing? Margaret's voice rose to a shrill pitch. I and your mother. I was protecting your interests. If you'd just taken that corporate job like I wanted, none of this would have. None of this would have what? I interrupted. Been discovered? Because I've found more, Margaret. Much more. Would you like me to show everyone what happened to Rebecca's trust fund too? Rebecca's head snapped up. My what? The Waterford crystal centerpiece on Margaret's perfectly set table seemed to vibrate with the tension in the room. Rebecca's face had gone from shock to ashen as the implications of my words sank in. My trust fund. Rebecca's voice trembled. The one you said was lost in the 2008 financial crisis? I pulled up another document on my laptop. According to these records, your trust fund was very much alive in 2015. All $175,000 of it was transferred to an account in the Bahamas, just before you started asking questions about accessing it for your daughter's college funds. Thomas's fork clattered against his plate. Margaret, tell me you didn't. But Margaret was already shifting into defensive mode, her pearl necklace clicking as she straightened her spine. Rebecca never had a head for business. She married that teacher. She spat the word like it was poison. I was protecting the family money. Family money? Rebecca stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. That was my money. Money that Grandpa left for my children's education. Oh, please. Margaret waved her hand dismissively, though I noticed it shaking slightly. As if you would have invested it properly. Look at how you live. In that tiny house, driving that ordinary car. We live within our means. Rebecca's husband, Dan, spoke up for the first time. Unlike some people who need to steal from their own children to maintain their lifestyle. Margaret's face flushed red. How dare you? I have never stolen. Then explain this. I interrupted, turning my laptop again. Bank records showing transfers from both trust funds to accounts in your name. Investment documents with forged signatures. And here's my personal favorite, emails between you and your financial advisor in the Caymans discussing how to hide the transactions. Michael, who had been unnaturally quiet, finally spoke. Did Dad know about any of this? Thomas's face was ashen. I knew your mother had expensive tastes. But this, he turned to his wife. How much, Margaret? How much have you taken? I answered before she could lie again. Total amount from both trust funds, plus various other borrowed funds from family accounts, $642,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Almost $750,000, Rebecca whispered. While my girls have been saving babysitting money for college. Margaret's carefully constructed facade began to crack. It's not what you think. I had a plan. The investments in the Caymans were never investments, I finished. They were withdrawals at luxury resorts, high-end boutiques, and yes, that yacht club you love so much. Would you like to see the credit card statements? I am still your mother. Margaret's voice rose hysterically. Everything I did was for this family's reputation. Do you know how it looks when my children live like ordinary people? Like criminals? Michael asked quietly, because that's what fraud is, Mom. It's criminal. Margaret's face went from red to white. You wouldn't dare press charges. I'm your mother. You keep saying that, Rebecca said, gathering her purse. But mothers don't steal their children's futures. Thomas stood up, his lunch untouched. I'm calling our lawyer and our accountant. This ends today. Thomas. Margaret reached for her husband's arm. You can't be serious. Think of the scandal. The scandal. Thomas's voice was ice. You stole from our children, Margaret. From our grandchildren. You've been living a lie and making me complicit in it. The scandal is the least of your worries. I pulled out one final document, the one I've been saving. Before anyone calls any lawyers, you should know that I've already reported the fraud to the relevant authorities. They're very interested in speaking with you, Margaret, about certain international banking laws you violated. The perfect lunch lay in ruins around us, much like Margaret's carefully constructed web of lies. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass, missing it entirely and knocking it over. Red wine spread across her imported tablecloth like blood. I can fix this, she whispered, but nobody was listening anymore. The weeks following what we now call the incident were a blur of lawyers, federal investigators, and family therapy sessions that nobody really wanted to attend. Margaret's carefully curated world crumbled faster than the uneaten dessert she'd spent 3 days preparing. The investigation revealed even more than I had initially uncovered. Beyond the trust funds, Margaret had been running a complex scheme involving multiple offshore accounts, forged documents, and what one investigator called creative bookkeeping that would make Bernie Madoff proud. I found another account, I told Michael one evening as we sorted through the endless paperwork. She'd been skimming from your father's business accounts too, almost $100,000 over the past 2 years. Thomas, upon learning the full extent of his wife's deception, filed for separation. He moved into a hotel, leaving Margaret alone in their mansion with nothing but her designer clothes and crushing guilt for company. The federal investigators were particularly interested in the Cayman Islands connections. It turned out Margaret's financial advisor there was actually running a money laundering operation, and she had unknowingly become part of it. I just wanted to maintain our lifestyle, she sobbed during a family meeting called by the lawyers. To keep up appearances, is that so wrong? Wrong enough to face federal charges, Rebecca replied coldly. Her daughters sat beside her, their college dreams now secured by the recovery of some of the stolen funds. The recovery process was slow but thorough. Margaret's assets were frozen, her passports confiscated. The yacht share was sold, the designer clothes and jewelry went to auction, and the mansion was put on the market to help repay the stolen funds. Perhaps the most surprising development came from Thomas. After the initial shock wore off, he threw himself into making things right. He liquidated his own retirement accounts to help repay his children's stolen trust funds. I should have seen it, he told us one evening, looking older than his years. All those trips, the endless shopping. I chose to believe her excuses because it was easier than facing the truth. Margaret avoided jail time, but only barely. Her cooperation with the federal investigation and Thomas's repayment plan convinced the judge to sentence her to house arrest and mandatory financial counseling instead. She moved into a small apartment, paid for by Thomas out of what he called residual guilt, and started seeing a therapist 3 times a week. The woman who once wouldn't be seen in anything but Gucci now shopped at Target, her ankle monitor clashing with her dramatically reduced wardrobe. 6 months after, we held another family dinner, this time at Michael's and my house, with mismatched plates and simple homemade food. Rebecca's daughters proudly announced their college acceptance letters, now fully funded by their recovered trust money. Margaret came too, dressed in off-the-rack clothes, her jewelry conspicuously absent. She sat quietly through dinner, a shadow of her former imperious self. I've been doing a lot of thinking in therapy, she said as we cleared the plates, about why I did what I did. The therapist says I have something called affluenza, an addiction to wealth and status. That's not an excuse, Mom, Michael said firmly. No, she agreed, surprising us all. It's not. But understanding it helps me fight it. I am sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am. Rebecca and Michael exchanged looks. The road to forgiveness would be long, if it existed at all. As everyone was leaving, Margaret lingered in our doorway. You know what the hardest part is? She asked quietly, realizing that all the things I bought, all the status I tried to maintain, none of it made me happy. Not really. I watched her walk to her used Toyota, a far cry from her former Mercedes, and felt Michael's arm slip around my waist. Think she's really changed, he asked. Time will tell, I replied. But at least now she knows money can't buy the things that really matter. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, Michael found me looking at our wedding photo, the one where Margaret had insisted we all pose in front of her prize roses. You know what's ironic? He said. All those years she spent looking down on your job as a forensic accountant, and that's what finally stopped her. I smiled, thinking about the twists and turns that had brought us here. Sometimes the best gifts come in unexpected packages. Like a wife who can track international money laundering, he teased. Like a family that values truth over appearances, I corrected. The next day, Margaret would start her community service at a financial literacy program for low-income families, a requirement of her plea deal that seemed particularly fitting. Our family was forever changed, but maybe, just maybe, it was changed for the better. Sometimes the biggest frauds hide behind the most perfect facades, but the truth, like red wine on a white tablecloth, has a way of leaving permanent marks.